There may have been bigger and faster athletes than Brian Oneil during his high school career, but you would be hard-pressed to find one with more determination and commitment. Brian Oneil graduated in the early 1980s, but he could have fit easily during the 1960s with his straight-laced, buttoned-up All-American boy persona, whose drive turned him into one of the best three-sport athletes Reading High ever had. Football, wrestling, and baseball were his high school sports, and he certainly made the most of them. Football may have been the sport Brian was most noted for. At 5'9" and 180 pounds by his senior year, Oneil, a running back, had a senior year for the record books in the fall of 1982. A starter also in his junior year, Brian became the catalyst for a very good 7-3 Reading High team that saw him score 19 touchdowns in a variety of ways. He rushed for 1,111 yards, caught 12 passes, and threw for 3 touchdowns. His 116 points scored that season broke a 28-year record for Reading High School. That season, he wound up second in Eastern Mass Division I scoring. Also exceptional punter, Brian averaged 38.6 yards per kick. He played outside linebacker while also returning kicks and punts for the Rockets. Oneil did it all that fall, whether it was scoring 4 touchdowns against Belmont, throwing a halfback option pass for a TD against Wakefield, then batting down a late Wakefield pass to preserve the win, or returning a punt for a touchdown in the annual Thanksgiving Day game at Stony. Brian Oneil had one of the more special seasons in Reading High football history. He was named a Middlesex League All-Stars for his efforts and was chosen for the Harry Aganis All-Star football game. Brian was also the recipient of the coveted Ingersoll Award at Reading High that is presented to the Rocket football player who exemplifies leadership, sportsmanship, desire, performance, and dedication to the team's success. Wrestling was the sport Oneil came late to, but he treated it with no less passion than football or baseball. In fact, wrestling may have been the one he was most dedicated to improving in. Prior to his freshman year, Brian went to a summer wrestling camp at Plymouth State to better understand the moves and techniques of freestyle wrestling. He proved to be a fast study. Brian was the first RMHS sophomore to qualify for the States since Reading Athletic Hall of Famer Tim Holmes did in 1979. Coached by another Reading Athletic Hall of Famer in Tom Darren, Oneil lost only 4 dual matches in his 3 years on the varsity. He ranked second at 169 pounds his senior year, but an injury prior to the States prevented him from finishing off his career. Oneil, unfortunately, was in the same weight class for 3 years as Woolburn's New England champ Keith McLaughlin. However, instead of moving up to the 187 pounds by his senior year, which was his normal weight at the time, Brian embraced the challenge of competing against McLaughlin and took the weight off to remain in McLaughlin's weight class. Brian wanted to win, and he wanted to win against and compete against the best. Telling Brian Oneil he couldn't do something just made him all that more determined to do it. In the spring of his senior year, Brian was Reading's shortstop and pitcher for the baseball team, batting .321 with 2 home runs while going 3-1 on the mound with a 2.96 ERA for another Reading Athletic Hall of Fame coach, Pete Moscarello. The Rockets of 1983 finished a very respectable 11-9, which would have made the state tournament under current qualifying standards, but back then the winning percentage was 70%, so Reading missed out putting an earlier in that they had hoped for Brian Oneil's high school playing career. Brian Oneil ranked 7th in his graduating class of 408 and received an academic scholarship to Harvard that covered over 3/4 of the cost of attending the Ivy League school. At Harvard, his determination and will to succeed did him well. Again, there may have been bigger and faster athletes than Brian Oneil, but you would be hard-pressed to find one with more determination and commitment. And by his senior year in football with the Crimson, he was the team's starting fullback and punter. He earned 2 varsity football letters and led Harvard in rushing his final season, while also serving as the team's punter. He was chosen an All-New England honorable mention in the fall of 1986. Now a successful businessman and with a great family, Brian resides in Byfield, Mass. He still finds some time to play in the Reading Men's Softball League during the summers, keeping in touch with his hometown. So it is with great pride the Reading Athletic Hall of Fame inducts Brian Oneil into its Hall of Fame class of 2015.